Mhm.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Women on Wednesdays. I am Betsy Fischer Martin, and I am the Executive Director of the Women in Politics Institute at American University. To those of you new to our events, WPI is a nonprofit and nonpartisan institute in AU's School of Public Affairs that aims to close the gender gap in political leadership. We offer academic training and campaign training for young women, and we facilitate research and discussions like this one on women in public service and diplomacy. So thank you for being a part of our conversation this evening. We are delighted to have with us Ambassador Capricia Marshall, who has served 2 U.S. presidents. She started her career in the Clinton White House as the First Lady's special assistant, and then rose to the very high-profile position of social secretary. And fast forward to the Obama administration, and she was called back into service, and this time becoming what she has called her dream job, the chief of protocol of the United States. Based upon that incredible experience that she had, she has written the aptly titled new book, Protocol: The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You. So we are going to talk to Capricia about not only having a front row seat to presidential history, but she's also was ultimately the person behind the scenes in charge of planning every detail. So no stress there. She has so many lessons to share about the power of connection, humanity, and building bridges that are applicable really to everyday life, not just U.S. presidents. She has some fun practical advice that will help you avoid causing any of your own international incidents, like messing up a toast or mishandling someone's business card. So she'll get to some of those tips as well. I'm going to save plenty of time for your questions. So speaking of that, a little tour around Crowdcast, if you're not familiar with this platform. You will see at the bottom of your screen a prompt that says ask a question. And if you click on that, you'll be able to type in a question there, and you'll also be able to upvote other people's questions that you're interested in as well. You'll also notice a big green button in the middle of the screen, most importantly, and that is to pre-order a copy of Capricia's book, which is out on June 23rd, so you can be among the first to read it. So with that, welcome, Capricia. We're so glad to have you with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Betsy. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely. So I want to start by asking you, you write that protocol in the book is a legitimate superpower. Can you tell us how?
Well, first, I just want to say again, thank you so very much for inviting me, Betsy. It is wonderful to be here with you. As everyone who is watching knows well, you are a media and political savant, that you are a businesswoman extraordinaire, and you have led the charge here as the executive director of Women in Politics. And I admire you so very much.
Thank you
for all of that. But I cherish most your friendship.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad to be here in this capacity, but also in friendship.
Absolutely.
I'm thrilled that you are highlighting my book, and particularly at this time. Protocol is a superpower because it has the hidden power of using micro moves, small details that when all put together, it has this extraordinary macro effect. And I saw that superpower in play time and time again. When I traveled with the president often,
right.
on a particular occasion, we traveled to Mexico for the G20. And it was the first time President Obama was going to be meeting with President Putin as president. And so our team had gone in, and we've invested a lot of time and effort into each and every detail. We wanted to make sure that that engagement was solid for our president. And in particular, it was staged in a way, it was presented in a way, it was arranged in a way that pivoted the power in his favor. From the room size, to the pens that were used, to the food that was on the table, to the greenery that was set up, there was no detail that was too small. we observed every single one of them and we tended to every single one of them. And so the day of the event, I gotta say, I was a little nervous. The car rolled up a little late and President Putin got out, kind of lifted his chest a little bit, and I extended my hand in welcome and then began to escort him to the room. And as we approached, there was President Obama standing tall and with his winning smile on. And I also knew a little fact that apparently President Putin was not thrilled about the fact that Secretary Clinton might be joining them for this engagement. And I believe he thought that she actually wouldn't be at the engagement. So after I made the introductions, the greetings, which are so important as well, President Obama took a slight step to the right and said, "Have you met my Secretary of State?" And you could see there was this hiccup, just that like a slight moment where President Putin was like, "Oh," and caught a bit of surprise. I have to say that set the tone. It's what we call the mindset for diplomacy. Because not only is it the physical tools that we prepare and that are part of this superpower, but it's also those mindset tools that are a part of this superpower. You know, walking into the engagement, having my leader, the head of my organization, my CEO, in the right mindset, and also kind of taking your opponents or the person that you're working with a little off of their game as well.
Thank you, Capricia. Just 1 second, because I'm wanting to make sure we are actually on the air and everything is good. I think everything's fine. Someone was going to let me know if they're not, because I just saw a text message that I didn't like. Tell us about, I want to get your thoughts on why now, why you decided to actually write this book now, and tell us a little bit about the great cover of the book as well.
Oh, well, I was very proud of this cover. It is a moment that I served in every one of my engagements. It was the extension of my hand in welcome to visiting dignitaries, kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers. I was the hand that welcomed them to the United States on behalf of the president. And I have to say, it still makes me a little verklempt when I even talk about it. It sends a little chill through me, because it's a great honor. And it's the reason that the chief of protocol receives the rank of ambassador, because we stand instead of the president. And so at the end of that red carpet, which is just outside of the south portico door on the south grounds of the White House, I await the arrival of the visiting dignitaries' limousine, their entire motorcade. And it was a tremendous honor to be doing that. So that's why I selected this photo, because it was that moment for me that was ever so special, and that I think is really emblematic of the book. It is about welcoming. It is about respect. It is about civility. Those are the core tenets of protocol, the foundation of protocol. That's why we set up this structure, so that our leaders walk into their engagements feeling very secure, and they can then engage in the policy negotiations at hand. For me, I wrote this book because I really wanted to share these tools with everyone. I think they're applicable whether you're in government, in business, or in your personal life. I have served in over 12 years in government service at those at the highest levels, in 2 phenomenal jobs. I love both of my positions as social secretary to President and Mrs. Clinton, and then as United States Chief of Protocol to President Obama.
Tell us about your going from Cleveland, Ohio, to serving 2 U.S. presidents. You are the daughter of 2 immigrants. There's your mom and your dad. Yeah. Tell us about them and where they grew up and the values that they instilled in you.
Well, I am as you say, I'm first generation American. My mother is from Mexico, and my father is from then Yugoslavia, and now it's Bosnia-Herzegovina, but we consider ourselves Croatian. And they arrived to the United States with very little in their pockets. My father actually arrived with $4 in his pocket, and they met in Cleveland, Ohio, of all places, on a blind date. I'm not quite sure it was love at first sight, but it certainly lasted for over 60 years. I had a front row seat to the celebrations in my grandmother's house of the wonderful culture, our Mexican, Croatian culture, and that of our neighbors as well. We had so many neighbors from Lebanon and Russia and Italy. And in her tiny, tiny little home, it was like a mini UN. So many cultures were celebrated and so many different types of food were served. And it was wonderful. But I do have to say that there were moments also that I saw both of my parents go through of slights and slurs, because my dad had a very thick accent. He spoke like this with his Croatian accent. And my mom was not the creamiest of colors, if you will, in our neighborhood. And I internalized that discrimination. And I wanted to always, in my future, in some way, somehow, celebrate these differences, celebrate these wonderful cultures, get to know people from other places and know why they may have certain traditions. And for them also to really get to know us as Americans. It is a powerful, powerful way to enter a relationship, a negotiation, is to express who you are, authentically and forthrightly, and also really have a sense of curiosity as to who are they. The cultural IQ is so, so very important in your professional life and in your personal life.
So tell us how you originally came into the White House working for the Clintons.
Well, I consider it a little bit of a Forrest Gump story. I was a law student and a law school professor friend of mine whose name was Bill Marshall, absolutely no relation. He came up to me and he said one day, there's this great guy running for president. His name is Bill Clinton. And I'd never worked on a presidential campaign before. I dabbled a little bit in local politics. So I started to look him up and to read a little bit about him. And then they gave me this one VHS tape that was cherished, and I popped it in. It was called The Covenant. And I watched this with my father, who was a Reagan Republican. And together we looked at it, and my father said, uh-oh, Capricia, Bush is in trouble. This guy has something. And I said, okay, I'm going to go work for him. And I did. I went out on the road and I traveled all over Ohio. And then I was recruited by a great guy by the name of Steve Silverman to go to Little Rock, Arkansas. And so I went down there. I met all of these individuals from throughout the Clinton campaign, the famous James Carville and George Stephanopoulos, and then got to know Patty Solis, who was heading up the First Lady's efforts. And I said, I really want to work for her. I think I could help this woman. Her shoulder pads are way too big and she's got to get rid of those headbands. Boy, is she smart. And so I went out on the road with her and managed her issues. It was fantastic. We had the time of our lives out there. And then when we returned to back to Little Rock, Arkansas, back to the governor's mansion, one afternoon, she just turned to me and she said, Capricia, I really want you to come with me to the White House, to work at the White House. And I had just gotten married. And I said, well, I'm going to have to talk to my husband, but boy, I want to go. My husband immediately said, absolutely, you're going. And I became her special assistant.
That's so great. Now, there's a story, just a little teaser I want you to tell before we go. Don't tell it now. It's just it's my favorite story that you tell about your time with the First Lady. So hold on to that. But fast forwarding into your position with President Obama, you alluded to this a little earlier. You write about the two overarching goals of diplomatic protocol: to bridge and to persuade. Explain a little bit more about what you mean by that, and tell us about your unusual quandary involving a noodle in 2009.
Yes, well, your efforts in, well, let me first state this, that protocol really is a roadmap to your professional, your social, and your cultural engagements. It defines a path for you that is clear of any potholes, allowing you then to accurately, to the best of your ability, engage in the discussion that you want to get to the point, to your goals that you intend to, and using both the tools of bridging and persuading help you get there. Bridging, you really want to create a connection with that person who's sitting across the table from you. You want to make sure that there is some way that you are now beginning to become tethered to them. And persuading was that you really, after creating a bit of a bridge, you want to persuade them to come around and see this your way. And in every one of our exchanges, our visits, I always had in the back of my mind, as we developed the entire visit, these two very important tools of bridging and persuading. Early on in the Obama administration, we traveled. It was my first trip to China. We had taken many thereafter, but it was on the first trip to China. And so we really prepared. We looked at every moment of his schedule, of the president's schedule, and making sure that we were prepared for anything that might come up. And we even thought through a few things that might happen by chance. President Obama was invited the night before the state dinner to President Hu Jintao's Camp David, if you will. It's called the Diu Tai, for a private dinner. And so we had all settled in, and the staff are crammed in this back room, and we're all awaiting, for the dinner to begin. And then suddenly, protocol officer who was assigned to the trip by the name of Penny Price, an amazing civil service career officer. She comes up to me. She's like, Capricia, the chief of protocol, the Chinese chief of protocol would like to talk to you. Can you give him a moment? I said, of course. And so he walks over and he's just like, Madam Ambassador, I have to tell you, my president would like to make a noodle. President Obama. And I'm like, what? He said, yes, we are going to make a noodle. I said, can you explain to me how, and is this important? And he did explain to me the process, and he did explain to me how important it was to their Chinese culture and to this visit. And so after consulting with a few staff folks, I decided I need to tell the president that he had to make a noodle. And so I walked over to the table and whispered in his ear and said, Mr. President, President Hu Jintao would like to make a noodle. And he looked up at me with kind of that look like what that I got to know pretty well over the years. And instead of saying anything, he said, this is important, right? And I was like, yes, sir. I advise we do this. And he said, okay, let's make a noodle. And so they stood shoulder to shoulder, side to side, with a chef plopping a pile of dough between the two of them. And they began to make this noodle, laughing all the while and really enjoying it. But it is exactly why protocol is a superpower. It was that small detail on this very first, very important visit that started to create this bond between these two leaders, this very important bond that will hopefully lead to a stronger relationship throughout the years.
And you also have talked in your book about sort of the importance of the social network with diplomacy at play. And you write about a great moment where the Prime Minister of the UK, President Obama, took him to the Final Four. Tell us about that and why it's so important sometimes to go outside of that meeting room or that's, the stuffy conference area and to engage one-on-one in more of a social setting.
Oh, it is so important. The power of place. I talk about it throughout one entire chapter. It is so very important. And one of those soft power tools I used again and again to effectively help President Obama create the right ambiance for the type of engagement he wanted to have. I was very connected to the National Security Council and the goals that they were setting forth for each of our bilateral discussions. And so I knew at each one, what are we ultimately trying to achieve? President Obama was given the duty of carrying forward this special relationship between the United States and the UK. And so on this visit, he wanted to really strengthen this relationship with Prime Minister Cameron. And so he wanted to take him outside of the Oval Office, take off the suit, put on the casual clothes, and go and do one of his favorite things. Learn a little bit more about me. I love basketball. I want to take you to the Final Four, March Madness, so that you experience real basketball. And also, I'd like to teach you a little bit, because as we understood, Prime Minister Cameron really knew nothing about basketball at all. And so President Obama relished taking the opportunity to teach you about his favorite sport. It's also a little bit of a power dynamic, because you're sort of taking the edge here. You're taking the lead in this relationship. Although we do know Prime Minister Cameron said next time it's cricket, and I get to teach you.
So sometimes mistakes can happen, and the fallout can sometimes be significant. You write about committing a protocol sin of the highest order, quote unquote. Tell us what went wrong that had to do with a flag at a meeting in New York, and how you very diplomatically tried to fix that situation.
Yes, this one, I'm still feeling it within me. I am having a little bit of a cringe moment, if you will, just thinking about what happened that day. We were at the Waldorf Astoria, and we were the hosts for the ASEAN meeting. And it was within the framework of the UN General Assembly. And we were so busy, so incredibly busy. President Obama and Secretary Clinton had extraordinary schedules. They were going minute by minute, both of them. And so our team was working round the clock. Literally, I think I was getting about 30 minutes of sleep each night. And we made two big errors. One, we reluctantly relegated our duty of putting the flags up by someone who was not a protocol officer. And then secondarily, we did not have 6 eyes on that detail, checking and confirming that all flags were appropriately displayed. It was so in the middle of the event, one of my just wonderful protocol officers, one of our deputies, Natalie Jones, she came up to me, and she's someone who's always unflappable, just wonderful, keeps her composure constantly. And she came up to me and she said, "Capricia, we have a problem. There is a problem with the Philippine flag." And I said, "What is the problem?" She said, "It is inverted." Oh. Inverted? Said, yes. And she said, but worse yet, when it is inverted, it is a call to war. It is a symbol that the nation is at war. And I said, "It's at war? I have now told the world that the Philippines is at war?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay." We went right into action. We immediately remedied it. We fixed the flag. I then immediately went to the ambassador and made my apologies. And as the NSC, various staff members are barreling at me saying, "Capricia, what happened?" I knew who I had to make my deepest apology to immediately, and that was the president. And, he's usually standing there tall with his wonderful glistening eyes and twinkling eyes, I should say, and looking down upon me. But this time they didn't twinkle so much. And he said, "Capricia, what happened?" I explained it. And he said, "We're going to make sure this never happens again, right?" And I said, "Absolutely, sir. It will never happen again." And it never, ever did. It really shows the importance of symbolism. The flag is a symbol of a nation, and we need to hold dear to that. We need to cherish it. We need to make sure that it is attended to. And so again, no detail is too small. Every single one matters.
And there is the flag. Sorry, I was trying to put that up earlier and I was having a little bit of an issue. So I want to actually show everybody too the basketball picture.
Oh, yeah.
That I couldn't get out earlier. And then also there's the noodle. So I'm catching everybody up on our slideshow that I wasn't able to do before. And so this is a great photo because this is another part of the job that you had, which was dealing with the diplomatic corps of all the ambassadors serving their countries in the United States. And you all had a terrific program called Experience America, where you got them out and about around the country so that they could see up close different parts of America and come together and learn about our country, but also engage in sort of the fellowship and friendship that is so important in diplomacy. Can you talk a little bit about that program?
Oh, I love this program, I have to say, but I'll put it into a bit of a context here. It was a part of a larger endeavor. Secretary Clinton in a assistant secretary's meeting said to each and every one of us, I want you to go back to your offices and think of new ways that we can engage with our bilateral partners, ways that we can strengthen this relationship, and come back and give them to me, and we'll try to implement all of them. So I did just that. I went back to the Office of Protocol, gathered the team and said, guys, what else can we do? And I spoke to some of my predecessors who had fantastic ideas. And we then created the Diplomatic Partnerships Division. And within the Diplomatic Partnerships Division, we had several programs, and one of them was Experience America. Now, it really was the idea was of Ambassador Nancy Brinker, who was Chief of Protocol for President Bush. Before leaving, she said to me, you have to continue this program. I just started it, but don't let it die on the vine. Keep it going. And so we did. And we made sure that there was an official budget, and we continued the program onward strong and had so many thereafter, and it still exists today. One of my most memorable Experience Americas was when we accompanied the ambassadors to Alaska. Many of them can't get to Alaska because the United States is such a large posting, and they just can't make it there. And so with a program like Experience America, certainly it helps them. And so when we were there, we got to introduce them to this wonderful part of our great nation and a different slice of our culture. They really enjoyed it. And there was one memorable moment on a train ride back from Glacier Bay where all of the ambassadors were together, and we were watching as the glaciers were passing over us. And I fear that they won't be there much longer. So if you haven't been to Alaska, go, go, go. But during that time on the train, I will say that might have been a little bit of red wine, but there was a little band, and the ambassador of Chile played the guitar. He grabbed the guitar, and then on backup was the ambassador of Croatia and Peru and Japan, and they all started singing, I can't get no satisfaction. I joined in too. It's a wonderful collaborative moment where we were really sharing so much about ourselves. It's all about getting to know the other person and for them to get to know who we are. That creates these bridges of understanding. And that's one of our major goals with the Diplomatic Partnerships Division.
You write also in the book about sort of extreme preparation. I love this photo of you because you're kind of peeking out, seeing what's going on, making sure all the planning has gone straight. But there were some times where, despite all of the planning, some things could go wrong, like the leader of the free world messing up a toast in front of the Queen. Tell us about that cringeworthy moment that inspired this headline in the Washington Post from 2011.
Well, my motto is fail to plan, to fail. And I think it's the motto of most of us over-prepared people, right, Betsy?
Right.
The president was prepared for this toast, and he was very prepared for this visit. As a matter of fact, just before we walked out for the state dinner, of which I was thrilled to be a part of, I one last time walked through the toast. Michelle Obama, she's wonderful. She always says, Barack, listen to Capricia one last time. She's going to give you the 1, 2, 3s on what to expect. So they were always prepared. They were always actually over prepared. They loved their briefings in advance and receiving things in memo. They never could receive enough information. One thing I valued so much in our relationship was that they valued what I had to tell them right before we would go into onto stage or into a greet or a meeting. The president would give me his, I would stand in front of him, and it's very difficult to stand in front of a president. Both the presidents I served were over 6 feet tall, and on my tippy toes, and look up at them and say, "I just need 2 minutes," and he'd go, "Okay, Capricia, go." And I had those 2 minutes. But on this occasion, it was not his fault, but there was a cue in his remarks for the band to start to play. The protocol for Her Majesty's state dinners are very specific. It's very, very specific, in particular when it comes to toasts, that as soon as the band hears, "And to Her Majesty the Queen," they begin to play. And so regrettably, in the middle of the president's remarks were the fateful words.
The roll cue.
They started to play. The president continued on with the toast while they continued playing our anthem. They couldn't stop playing our anthem because that would be inappropriate. And the president certainly couldn't stop his toast to Her Majesty. So Her Majesty was darting up these looks at her band like, "Oh, why did you start?" And it continued on. And regrettably, it will be a moment that we will all relive on YouTube.
Well, that's why you can write about these things in the book, right? You also have a chapter in there called Negotiating While Female. And you talk about sort of the soft power resources that can be used to level the gender playing field in diplomacy. Talk a little bit about your experience when it comes to female leaders, and also a little bit of a reflection now, during this current coronavirus crisis. We have seen so many female leaders of countries really are the ones stepping up and are been able to lead their countries during this time.
Well, the details, what we've seen, the results of their leadership is really the telltale here. Both Chancellor Merkel and Prime Minister Ardern, whom I've had the wonderful pleasure of meeting and getting to know personally, stepped right into this. But they used different qualities of leadership than many of their counterparts around the world with great success. First, they were very decisive. Second, they didn't use groupthink. They went out and they looked for diverse opinions. They looked for different sources of information. And lastly, they utilized empathy. Prime Minister Ardern was known on the day when she stated, "Everyone will shelter in place in my country." She had a discussion with her nation, and just after she had put her child to bed, she put on a comfortable outfit, I think a cozy sweatshirt, and had a Facebook Live conversation with her nation about why she was doing this and how she's feeling this pain as well. And their countries reacted. They listened. They did exactly what they were told to do. And the results were that they had a very quick time with this pandemic. The numbers went down swiftly, and they've been holding since then. So it's a different style of leadership. And I think one that is emblematic of to those around the world who should try to really mirror what they had done. I was very lucky throughout my career that I have served and I have become friends with, I think, one of our greatest female leaders, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Throughout my time, she has been my boss, a mentor, and a friend. She taught me some invaluable lessons and skills when I was very young in my career. One in particularly, how to be heard in a room when no one seems to be listening. even though I thought that in the Clinton White House, we were quite advanced when it came to parity between the sexes. There were times when myself and a colleague were the only two women in a room full of men. And my colleague might say something, and then the guy sitting next to her would repeat it, and everyone would be in agreement with him. And it was like she just wasn't heard. And so at one staff meeting, we told Hillary about this, and she said to us, well, then, Capricia, you repeat what Susan just said and say it again and again and again until she is heard. And it was like, rinse and repeat over and over again. And so I did just that. In many of our meetings, when my colleagues would say something, I say, wow, Mary just had a great point. Did everybody hear? Mary, can you repeat that point, please?
Right.
And then she would, and then suddenly we were being heard. Also, within the White House, she created such a great support system. There were so many of us who were young and starting families. And so for me, she would send broccoli over to my office. She would scoot me out the door when, I was staying too late. And when my son Cole was born, she knew I wanted to stay on and finish off the administration. And I was so happy that she made it possible for me to do that. She brought a crib out of storage, and Cole spent many an afternoon nap in Chelsea's old crib. It was just a wonderful environment for me and many of my colleagues.
So before we go to audience questions, and just a reminder to folks, if you have a question, please go to the Ask the Question tab at the bottom of your screen. Tell us the story of this ball gown here. I love this story, and you've told it over the years, and I get a kick out of it every time, of when you were tasked to bring the ball gown to the First Lady for the day of the inauguration.
Yes. So I was very lucky, again, to be selected by then Mrs. Clinton, our First Lady, to work on her staff. And I was staying with the president-elect and Mrs. Clinton at the Blair House, which is the president's guest house across the street from the White House. At that time, there was traffic that was still going on in between the White House and Blair House on Pennsylvania Avenue. And so I was asked to bring the gown to the White House to make sure that it didn't get lost in any of the moving vans and the boxes, so that she could wear it that evening on inauguration day. And so I carried the gown over, very carefully, going in and out of traffic a little bit. And then I made my way to the north side of the White House, and I approached the Secret Service hut that's there, and I was told, looking back upon it now, very foolishly in my head believed that I was to wave my way into the White House. And so I waved into the White House. And the Secret Service kind of looked at me like I really had lost my mind. And they were wondering, who's the lady with the dress and why is she waving at us? And so I kept saying, hello, I'm with the First Lady's gown and I'd like to come in. You can only imagine. Well, finally, a colleague of mine who was passing by said, Capricia, what are you doing? And I said, I'm trying to get into the White House. And he said, you need to submit your date of birth and your social security number. I'll do that for you and you can then get in. I'm like, oh, that does make sense. That does make sense.
Welcome to Washington, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have a lot of great questions I want to get to. Let's see. The first one is from Sonia. She says, what did you study to prepare for your position in the White House, and what previous experiences helped to prepare you?
Oh, well, first, I have two major passions. One is for history. I love reading history. I love to know what people have done previously. And so I I really did read up quite a bit, not before I was in the White House, but the moment that I got into the White House, I went to the curator's office. So it's a wonderful nook under the staircase of the White House on the ground floor. And I sat there and I read so many books from previous social secretaries and chiefs of staff and curators, etc. I was taking in all of the information I possibly could. And the other passion that I have is for etiquette. At the age of 3, I think it was, my mother enrolled me in Miss Manners. She wanted to make sure that I always felt comfortable in every situation, that I knew exactly which fork to use, and that I knew how to walk. And that was very important to her. And I appreciated that because knowing our background, she never wanted me to feel the discomfort that she did in certain social situations. And so I really honed in on that. I learned more about it and practiced it, rehearsed it. And then I've got to say that the best thing that you can do when you walk into government is talk to your predecessors. Do as much research as you can and talking to people who've held those positions before you. You learn so much through that collaborative spirit.
So speaking of that, there's a great question here from Jeremy Bernard, who was one of your successors. So you were his predecessor, and I'm sure you gave him lots of advice as he was the White House Social Secretary for President Obama. And he says, ask your thoughts about the current State Department, and have you been asked for any advice or help there?
Hello, Jeremy. Let me say some glowing comments about him. He served President and Mrs. Obama so well. He stepped into that position as the first guy, and we welcomed him. We wrapped our arms around him, and he's like our little brother now. We just adore him. But he did such a spectacular job for them and opened the White House to thousands and thousands of people so that they can experience the real excitement of the Obama administration. Yes, I have been asked, as many of us have who are former chiefs of protocol, our advice. And yes, you know me, Jeremy, I love to give advice. Hence, I wrote the book. I also think it's important, again, for those who have served before to pass down their years of experience, things that have gone right, things that may not have gone right, and to try to really help those in those positions move forward. We forget that it is not the president, but the presidency. It's the office of protocol. These are the lasting positions. These are the positions that we need to care for as we move through time from administration to administration. And so we continue to be caretakers of those positions. And I will consider myself an advisor and friend to the office of protocol forever.
Let's see, another question from Olivia. She says, you mentioned the importance of cultural IQ. How heavily does cultural diplomacy influence protocol? And do you see that changing now when the American image abroad has changed in recent years?
Well, yes. Cultural IQ is so very, very important. How those codes of conduct really they create these bonds of friendship, bonds and relationships, because what I'm doing is I'm conveying. President Obama did so very well. Secretary Clinton was just understood the importance of this. It's about telling the person sitting across from you, the person sitting next to you, this is who I am. And also, I'm so curious as to who you are. And I know I'm drilling down to the basics of cultural IQ here, but it is that. And it is about taking that curious step forward into learning more about that individual. I can't quite speak to the politics at hand. I'm not in the White House currently, so I don't know exactly why or how, what the motivation is. But what I do understand is that we need to cherish our image as Americans. We need to uphold those principles of democracy. And each of us can be ambassadors around the world to do that. Once we can travel back again, I certainly hope that people will take to their heart the honor and the privilege of being an American and presenting our best face around the world.
Great. Speaking of ambassadors, one of them has a question. Her Excellency Floretta Faber, who is the ambassador to Albania, is here tonight. And she says, protocol involves planning of every detail of very high-level events and meetings. Tell us a moment you were kept off guard or caught off guard because the president decided to change something at the very last moment. And do those changes happen very often?
Well, hello, Madam Ambassador. It's wonderful to see you virtually. We have to get back to our walks. She is one of my neighbors, so it is it's wonderful to have you on this discussion, this conversation. She represents her country so incredibly, incredibly well. Prime Minister is very lucky. Yes, of course, things go awry, but that's the beauty of protocol, is that you have a certain framework. You have something that's established. So then you're prepared for those yoga-like moves. You know, if something doesn't go in accordance to the plan, you can make the shifts to the right or to the left. And presidents have the prerogative, and they certainly do, make changes at the last moment all of the time. One time, I recall when I was serving under President Clinton, we were welcoming it was the 50th anniversary of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and we were welcoming 50 heads of chiefs of state and heads of government. And on that occasion, everything had to go in sort of military precision time. And we had rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And at the last moment, when we were walking through the final plans with President and Mrs. Clinton, they made a change. They made a change to where they were going to receive their guests. Now, the change was right. They should have made that change. But the trickle down of that change went through an entire command of people. There were so many, from us to the military, to the Secret Service, to each and every delegation lead. And we had a process, thank goodness, in which we could relay those changes. And the team adjusted immediately. I have been very, very lucky throughout my time in government service. I had an extraordinary group of folks work with me in the Social Secretary office, and an amazing group of individuals in the Office of Protocol. And we were like a well-oiled machine. When one cog shifted, the rest just shifted right with it, and we continued on the path at hand. But again, it really is the beauty of protocol and why people really need to implement protocols in their lifestyle, in their negotiations, in their everyday engagements and activities.
Great. Here's a question from Kimberly. Can you discuss how you weave your own personality and authenticity into formal protocol?
How I lead my?
Weave. Oh, weave your own personality and authenticity into formal protocol.
Well, I am who I am. And as you know, Betsy, well, and how many of my friends who are watching know well, I'm pretty, straight up. And so I think that worked to my advantage in the Office of Protocol. There is a trust factor when you are building up these relationships. Your counterparts want to know, they're holding the fate of my leader in their hands when they are planning the logistics of an event or setting the table for the negotiation. And they want to make sure that they are in trusted hands. And equally, I want to look to my counterpart that they are also taking good care of my President and Secretary of State. So being authentic and being pretty direct served me incredibly well. And I built up wonderful relationships around the world with all of my counterparts that I celebrated at the 2011 Global Chiefs of Protocol Conference we held for the first time in Washington, D.C. It was a wonderful collaborative convening of over 100 Chiefs of Protocol.
That's great. Here's another good question. How do you know when to break protocol, whether there is a tradition that may be sexist or racist, or simply too cumbersome or annoying? How do you know whether to continue it or to create new protocol? What about these sort of outdated customs and traditions?
Well, I don't believe that there is anything that is necessarily outdated. It just may no longer work in that current environment. We are living that right now. There are protocols of how we greet people, how we entertain, within our daily life now that will change, at least for the time being, and perhaps maybe for the long haul. No longer are people shaking hands, but we still want to greet one another, welcoming and respectfully. How do we go about doing that? How do we change that?
Right.
I'm beginning.
So will fist bumping be the new protocol?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Exactly, Betsy. I got book 2 already going.
Absolutely. Great. Here's a question. What advice do you have for prospective U.S. Foreign Service officers? I know you probably worked with a lot of them.
I did, and with great admiration. I think so very, very highly for career officers, both Foreign Service and Civil Service, who serve in our government. They do it for years at a time, and they do it with great privilege and honor, I know, and often with great sacrifice. And so I just admire them so very much. But they were invaluable assets to everything that I did. Within the Office of Protocol, if there was a new circumstance that arose, I would immediately go to those who have been there 25, 30 years and ask for their sage advice, because that situation probably came up during another administration, and they could tell me what went right or what went wrong, or perhaps don't cross that line. And I listened to them. They just again and again proved to be the continuity through our government. They were all apolitical. I could never tell if someone was on one side of the aisle or the other. They just served their country with distinction.
Great. Here's a question from a student. Is there a job field that protocol goes under? For example, if a college graduate is trying to enter the field, what are some entry-level type of jobs that come to mind?
Oh, well, first and foremost, I would say intern. If you can take the opportunity to intern in government, in any position in government, it will serve you so very, very well. They're so shorthanded that you get a lot of responsibility immediately. You are not running for coffee. You are not making copies, but you are writing and you are researching and you are involved. All of the interns that had worked for me went on to serve at the State Department in positions because they just knew exactly what needed to be done. They were invaluable to the work at hand. Thereafter, I would say that the entry level, the GS entry levels are posted with abundance, and people go in and out of government at a regular pace. So I would advise continuing to look at those boards and apply. Keep putting your name in for those positions. And I wish you great luck in your future endeavors. And I hope that at some point you will be serving our country.
Great. Let's see. Here's a question. Here's a question from Julie Russell. Would you ever consider running for office yourself?
I can say with quite immediacy, no, I would not. I am a wonderful staffer. I love to support our principals. I love to support the president and the Secretary of State, First Lady, the Vice President, all very, very important roles. And I know exactly how to go about doing that. But running for office has never been a dream of mine.
Is you sure that's definitive? No way, Capricia. We can't talk you into it. Okay, here's a question from Deb Brody. What did you do, if anything, to prepare the current administration? Well, I guess you didn't transition exactly over, but do they always have people to ensure protocol? And so what do you know now about, the current protocol office in the White House?
Well, there is a transition team from administration to administration. And at the State Department, they put in a great deal of effort to make sure that all of the information is transferred from the last Office of Protocol and every department within the State Department to those that are coming in. And there is a 3-month period of transition. There are specific transition offices. I had to sit in one of those offices until I actually was given the oath of office and was able to enter my office. And so there is a process and protocol that we all follow before you take on the new administration. And there was, as I understand, career civil service officials who assisted in transitioning the office from the Obama administration into the Trump administration. I was not there at the time. I had already left the post, sadly, a few years earlier.
Great. Let's see. Here is a good question to end on. Who were your mentors or persons of inspiration in the Foreign Service?
Oh, in the Foreign Service. Oh, that is a wonderful. Well, there were extraordinary individuals, and interestingly enough, most of them were brought in by Secretary George Shultz. I learned at one time. Bill Burns. He's just sort of the quiet giant, I would call him, because I could barely hear him in a meeting whenever he was meeting with one of his counterparts. But so incredibly effective, and how he changed our relationships always for the best. He was so well respected around the world, and I thoroughly relished the time that I knew him while he was in service. And Pat Kennedy was also one of the great career officers who also started under Secretary Shultz, and gave us all great guidance in the Office of Management. He knew how the State Department ran and was able to give us that instantaneous, very decisive advice when it counted. Rosemary Pauley, who served in my office, I had so admired her. Office, also I have to mention, in the Office of Protocol, currently serving as career officers and effusive Foreign Service officers, Sal Roberts and Penny Price, David Solomon. There's so many of them who have devoted their life and time. Shaneoh Calhoun. Their names just keep popping up in my head because I just admire how they have devoted their lives to country. It is quite extraordinary, and I consider myself so blessed to have served alongside them as we promoted and we advanced the foreign policy goals of the Obama administration.
I'm going to have one final question for you, but I do want to let everybody know before we go about our next 2 events coming up on Wednesdays. Next Wednesday, we are going to have the Senator from Iowa, Joni Ernst, here to talk about her new book, Daughter of the Heartland. That'll be next Wednesday, same time, same channel. And then the week after that, we're going to have Simone Sanders, who is a senior advisor with the Biden campaign, who worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign actually in 2016. And so she's going to be here in 2 weeks. So if you go to our main page here on Crowdcast, you'll be able to sign up for those both of those events as well. So Capricia, before we go, I want to ask you one final question. Give us your best tip. Your book is, the whole back portion of your book is just a list of great tips to know. Give us your favorite one that we can kind of take away tonight when it comes to protocol.
Oh, golly. One that I regret that I didn't say when you asked me about it was toasts.
Toast, yes.
Because we all toast people. Today, there's no clinking. We are just raising a glass like Her Majesty and approaching. But my 1, 2, 3s on toasting is that if you are toasting someone, you should stand. You should have a glass with something other than water. It should not be water. It really should not be water. It's considered bad luck in most cultures. When you toast someone, you look that person that you're toasting in the eye, you raise the glass towards them, and you first address that person in your toast, and then you address the audience writ large. You say to all of them that you're welcoming them and give the reason why you are all gathered there today and why you are toasting that person. And then your final comment can be, pretty much a wild card. You can say, I'm so glad that we're having this opportunity. I look forward to the next time, or I certainly hope you're going to contribute to our efforts. Whatever it might be, you bring it around to our wrap up there. You approach these days, no clinking, and take your sip and then place your glass down.
Okay, well, I'm going to do a virtual toast to you here, Capricia, and thank you very much for being here with us this evening, for sharing all of your great wisdom that you've collected throughout your time in public service. And I think, as all of you can see, Capricia is just a friend to so many and so gracious with her time. And we always appreciate your insight and your counsel, and we appreciate you being here. And to everyone else, if I'll follow your toast instructions, thank you all for being here as well this evening. It was great to hear your questions and see so many people in the chat. And we hope we will see you back here next week, and have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Take care.